Greetings, everyone. My name is Latasha Drax, and I am the founder of Love Beyond the Wall. Love Beyond the Wall is a grassroots community advocacy group. What we do is work with women and families who are impacted by incarceration in love, in time, and in freedom. I founded this particular organization from my own personal lived experience, but recognizing that there was a need for those who had family members who were incarcerated, some form of support system that would allow them to belong somewhere, right? Now it has evolved to so much more. And for the past 3 years, I have been conducting these community conversations. And the conversations are focused on reentry and relationships, because that's part of the evolution of Love Beyond the Wall. And in that, I found that there are so many issues that take place behind the wall that impact the relationships, whether it's a spousal relationship, whether it's a familial relationship in that transition. And how can we, as a community, as a collective, how can we help with that transition? Not from the basis of, an apartment, housing, clothing, jobs, all of that is necessary. And we know there's so many organizations that stay in that space, but that's not my lane. My lane is reentry and relationships and the social development, the mental health of those who are coming home from prison and how it influences their families as well. So today's topic on prison rape, consent, and the aftermath, we're going to be looking at not only the lived experience of those who have a history of incarceration, but also briefly touching on the legislation that is geared at protecting those who are incarcerated, whether they're in jail, prison, or some form of detention or lockup. So we'll be discussing that and raising awareness on what that is and what it should do and how that has impacted or how it helped or not those who are on our panel. Okay, so once again, my name is Latasha, and I'm going to introduce our panel and the wonderful work that they are currently doing in this present moment. And I'm going to start with Mr. LaVar Reynolds. You're muted.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right. Yes. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm really honored to be a part of this discussion. I think it's really, really important that we have this discussion amongst our communities. But my name is LaVar Reynolds. I am the owner and chief executive officer of Universal Mental Health Services. We are a mental health agency based out of Newport News, Virginia, as well as we have another location in Richmond, Virginia. So we provide mental health and substance use disorder services for children, adolescents, and adults. My background is mainly, mental health, clinical counseling, and substance abuse counseling, but I also have a background in working with juvenile and adult sex offenders. So I hold a certification as well in sex offender treatment. I provided treatment in both inpatient settings, outpatient settings, as well as in the prisons. So I thought this topic was very interesting. I'm excited to be a part of this dialogue this evening, and I can't wait to dive into it.
Thank you so much, LaVar. Jan.
I'm Jan Lastocy, and I too am honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I am a prison rape survivor, and I'm an advocate who works with some of the local jails and anybody that will listen to me. And my goal is to put an end to prisoner rape.
Thank you so much.
I have been across the country talking to corrections officials. I've spoken at colleges, spoke in front of the Congress at a congressional hearing. I've been involved with PREA since before it was actually signed into law. So I met Latasha because we both took a course through the PREA Resource Center. And I said, here, I thought I knew everything there was to know about PREA. And I learned that I didn't know it all. But I also know that prisoner rape is something that is not talked about, and it needs to be. More people need to hear about it. That's how we're going to end it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jan. And
Thanks.
last but certainly not least, Miss Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Love Williams, pronouns she, her. I'm a survivor of prison rape as well as prison sexual assault. I'm based in New Jersey, and I'm the foundress of the Gen Love Project, and I provide welcome home packages to recently released and soon to be released LGBTQ plus folks coming home from prisons and jails along the East Coast. And I work for Black and Pink, specifically the NYC chapter, which focuses on the incarceration and reentry of LGBTQ plus and those living with HIV and AIDS.
Thank you so much. Okay, awesome. So let's just jump right into it. First and foremost, I want to just really, once again, we're not going to get into all of the ins and outs of PREA because it's so substantial. And as Jan said, no matter how much she's learned, there's still so much more that we continually learn on an ongoing basis. But the PREA stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. And I believe that it first was put into that legislation in about 2003, right? And the goal was to eliminate prison rape and the sexual victimization of those who are incarcerated. My first knowledge of PREA came when I was working on a book project for a formerly incarcerated individual. And as I'm reading her story and just reviewing it and just learning about her story, and not only her story, but about PREA, I was blown away because I had not ever heard of it. And all the work that I have done and all the work that I was doing, that was something that was really unknown to me. And as I started to learn more about it, well, my first comment to her was, "What is this?" And her comment wasn't very favorable, you know, and the conversations that I've had with those who do have a history of incarceration is it's not effective. It's this, it's that, and it's nothing that is favorable. And it should be. It should be something that is effective. It should be something that is used to protect those who are incarcerated from sexual victimization, because that's what we do outside of the prison system. We protect those who are victims of sexual violence. And so I started to really kind of dig into that and to learn more about it. And as Jan said, we met under a wonderful opportunity for training with the PREA Resource Center. And it was a great opportunity to learn even more, okay? And so when we talk about PREA and that legislation, we're talking about any sexual misconduct, and remember, prison rape and consent. And I want to say that I try to make sure that everybody is represented when we have these types of conversations. And it was a challenge and it was a struggle for me to bring in a heterosexual cisgender male who had a history of incarceration. We had one-on-one conversations. They were amazing conversations. They were conversations in which they talked about you know, PREA, and they talked about experiences that they may have had. And it would have been wonderful for any of them to be here to participate. But at the same time, they're not. And that goes back to the shame, the stigma, and just whatever else that sexual assault victims deal with, right? And maybe there weren't victims of prison rape, but what about those sexual, those consensual, and I use air quotes when I say consensual, because PREA also says that, you know, sexual misconduct, you know, consensual or even non-consensual intersexual relationships with someone who's incarcerated is inappropriate. It shouldn't happen. It's not supposed to be. And I like to equate it to a classroom. You know, most of us maybe have someone, a child in a school system, right? And then we've heard of stories in which the teacher has an inappropriate sexual relationship with a student. And you have that authority figure, and then you have a child, right? And we say a child because they're the student. That's not appropriate. We wouldn't say that that's acceptable, right? The same thing in having workplace relationships. You know, we kind of frown upon that. So what makes it right for there to be a consensual relationship within the prison system? A couple of years ago, the most recent story that I've come across in the news was the story of Vicky White. And Vicky White was involved with someone who was incarcerated. You know, she was a model correctional officer, and yet she got involved in this intimate relationship with someone who was incarcerated, and she broke him out of jail, and they were on this run. Reminded me of Bonnie and Clyde, that old movie, right? You know, and that story there. So she busted them out of jail, and they're on this wild goose chase with law enforcement, and she winds up, you know, committing suicide as a result because it had come to an end, right? These kinds of things are not supposed to happen, and these kinds of lives shouldn't be destroyed in any sense of the word when we're dealing with those that we're supposed to help or serve. So that's one thing that PREA tells us. This is unacceptable, whether it's consensual, whether it's non-consensual. And the fact that I don't have anyone here to talk about that type of relationship, you know, it is what it is, but it's something that we also have to think about, that it does happen. It is prevalent, but is it right? You know, what is it right? And that's just a thought to kind of ponder. Then we also have the, once again, saying the non-consensual relationships that may take place between a correctional officer and a person that is incarcerated. That's another thing that we have to kind of really, you know that this is happening. One of the conversations, or many of the conversations that I have, is like, maybe not so much in male prisons. You know, it's happening, but I've seen an influx of these types of the sexual violence against women that are incarcerated. And these are the conversations that we need to have to raise that awareness and say, you know, we remember the Me Too movement, you know, me too as a person who has a history of incarceration. It happened to me too. I matter. And, you know, I want to go to Jan and just kind of just give you the floor, because that has been your experience, or that was your experience when you were incarcerated. So just share that, just however you want to start, whatever you need to do to kind of let us know about your experience while you were incarcerated, where you were incarcerated, and how long possibly that you were incarcerated.
I was incarcerated in the state of Michigan. I started out where all the females back then started out, at Scott's Correctional Facility. And then I was moved to a work camp in Coldwater. And while I was there, my job was as a secretary slash warehouse worker in the warehouse that serviced the men's prison. Shortly after I got there, they hired a new employee. He worked mornings in the men's prison and afternoons at the warehouse. And he wasn't there 2 weeks before the first rape happened. And I say the first one because I didn't say anything. And it went on for almost 6 months, several times a week, until I got released to come home to the halfway house, the correction center. I never said a word to anybody. PREA didn't exist then. I had the pleasure, shall we say, when the warden gave her welcome talk to all the female inmates coming in, she let us know that if there was ever an issue between a guard, a corrections official, and an incarcerated person, she would always believe her people, as she called them. So one, I had my date. I knew when I was going home. I also knew that if he followed through on his threat to write a ticket, it would stop me from going home. So I guess I made the decision. I'm only here 6 more months. I can do this. And I let it go on.
Now,
I
Jean,
didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. You want
That's
to
okay.
finish it? Okay.
Nope, go ahead.
And so you said this was this new correctional officer who came in, and then the first time. What does that look like, for you, like that whole, how is that process look when you have a person in authority, the correctional officer, kind of accost you? Like, where does it take place? How does, who doesn't know that this is going on?
What happened was nobody at the warehouse liked him. He made everybody feel uncomfortable. Me, the other guys that worked there. He was always saying things that were inappropriate to me. Things like, you miss your husband, wanted to know what my sex life was like at home. And I answered him as much as I had to without getting a ticket. I couldn't be insubordinate to him. And then one day, because the way it worked in the warehouse is there always had to be somebody with me because he was the newest employee and he got the crap jobs. It was usually him that was with me. And we were in the wing where they kept all the dry goods. And I walked into the room and he was standing behind a pallet of cake batter. And he called me over there and he said he decided that he'd waited long enough. And I, said, what do you mean waited long enough? And he said, I know you miss it. And I said, miss what? And he proceeded to unzip his pants and told me that I was going to give him a blowjob. And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, do I have to get my pen out? Which I knew meant write me a ticket. And so I did what he wanted. And then he told me to go in the bathroom and clean up and keep my mouth shut.
And for the purpose of just those, when we say that ticket, right? What is that ticket? What does that mean? What does that look like?
If you do something wrong in prison, you get a ticket. It's a write-up.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the severity of what you do, determines your punishment. The worst ticket you can get is a sexual ticket, whether it's with another inmate, a guard, whatever. Those are the worst tickets. They will take your good time. You will stay there longer. I knew if I got a ticket, I wasn't going to get away from me. I'd have to be there longer for him to keep doing this.
And then that also goes back to, once again, tying it back into Priya about the risk of retaliation, right?
Yes.
That because you are put in that position, a vulnerable position, there are, once again, guidelines that says that the person that's incarcerated, has the right to be free from retaliation. Right.
Yes.
This, so, and you said that during your particular time, Priya didn't exist. Right. But you also said something that we also need to kind of even now that it does exist and, that when you have these tickets or the reports that someone may put in, it goes back internally into the prison. Right.
Correct.
For the Priya coordinator or the compliance manager to investigate these acts of sexual violence, whether it's harassment or rape.
Right.
And then that, once again, if it goes back into the very facility in which that correctional officer or even that incarcerated person is doing these things, that's where the investigation takes place, then that also opens up, risk of retaliation.
Right. And I know, like in my case, when I left, I just buried it. I didn't tell anybody. It was like I walked out of the prison and it was done. Only when they came to me 2 years later, did I talk about it. And another incarcerated person that he had raped had gotten DNA evidence. So the warden couldn't argue it. And so then they had to work backwards from her and see if there were any other victims. And so by the time they got to me, because I was the first one, then I'm dealing with, if I'd have said something, these other 5 women wouldn't have been raped. And, it's a crazy runaround, and you start to, question, did I do the right thing by not saying anything? And it took a long time. It took a lot of counseling. It took a lot of talking to finally realize that I did what was best for me. My head knew I did what was best for me, but it took my heart a long time to figure it out.
Okay. Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jan. When we also look at our PREA standards, we know that, once again, protection. We're talking about protection of those who are incarcerated, regardless of their male, where they're female, how they identify in the LGBTQ+ community, whether they're transgender or not, right? There are policies, there is rules, let's say, right, that says these are the things that are supposed to happen if you are a transgender person that's incarcerated. That goes to, whether they're getting, they're given showers that protects their privacy, whether they are getting checked, body searched by a correctional officer that they're comfortable with as far as gender is concerned. There are so many things to protect, particularly, once again, everyone, but also transgender individuals, because they have the highest risk of being unsafe while they are in prison, right? Highest risk, one of the highest risks. So we want to make sure that when we are talking about the humanity of those who are incarcerated, that we're including every single one, that everyone is identified. So Jen, I want to ask you to tell us about your experience, first and foremost, with PREA during your incarceration. Mention, where you were incarcerated and the length of time, whatever you feel, but just let us know where you were incarcerated. And first off, your experience with PREA, what you knew, what you didn't know. Talk about that first.
Well, I was incarcerated in New Jersey. The first facility was Southern State. Second facility was Northern. Final facility was East Jersey Correctional Facility, which some people may know it as Rawway. My knowledge of dealings with PREA is none. I've been home 10 years, but not until my final 6 months of my incarceration did I ever even see a sign. And it took a cisgender heterosexual guy to feel like he was being sexually violated by his elder bunkie, roommate, cellmate, however you want to put it, for the facility that I was in to finally put these things up. And I was asking about it. I didn't know what it stood for. all I was told is, you don't need it, you're about to go home. And so, and I said, I just pretty much put it out of my mind. But nevertheless, when I got to my first facility, which was a dormitory style facility, I was moved from the reception and I was moved to a gang unit with each unit has about 158 bodies with 2 officers per shift. First, second shift, and third shift is 1 officer. I kept hearing this term about the punk gotta go, and never knowing it's me, because my knowledge of the word punk prior to incarceration was a person who was scared to fight. And I'm going to defend myself at all costs, especially when I bother nobody. I just get on my bunk. I keep a book in front of my face because I don't want no one to feel uncomfortable. I'm asking. I go to prison a fully developed trans woman, meaning my breasts and stuff is already prominent in there, and I'm not giving a bra. I'm not giving anything. I'm just sitting here with a T-shirt, and you can see the color of my areolas. You can see the shape of my breast all through the shirt. It's a thin white T-shirt. I am so uncomfortable trying to shower. At first, it's a single shower, but it's only like a plastic curtain. I'm trying to shower at all times of the day, hoping that everybody's so preoccupied that nobody will bother me. But it seems like every time I go in the shower, all of a sudden now, everybody got to come and shave and use the toilet and everything else, and I'm uncomfortable. The shower keeps being open. Nevertheless, on August 8th, at Friday night, I kept hearing about the punk, and it's going down tonight. I don't have a clue that the punk is me, let alone what's going down tonight. I feel awkward. I feel like somebody's like right next to me and I'm in a bunk. Next thing I know, I was punched in the face and my face was pushed in the pillow. And I was raped, but this is by a fellow incarcerated person. Within 24 hours of that, I was gang beat, held down, and beat with combination locks. A big melee broke out because I guess it was stupid for them to beat me that bad, because now I can't get up in the morning to go get my psych meds or my hormones, which were both controlled substances. And if I don't go get them, they're ultimately going to come get me. And I couldn't make it to medical like normal because I was so battered. They got to come to me. Coming to me, they see my body, or the blisters burst open and everything else. Everybody started snitching on each other. This is how I always knew the time of my assault, because everybody snitched on each other, and DOC, their focus was protect themselves. My phone calls, I was not allowed to use the phone. Even in the medical unit, I wasn't allowed to use the phone. Every time when I could start writing again, my letters at this point in time apparently were never making it out the facility, because clearly I'm writing my mom to tell her what just took place at this time. Because like I said, I didn't know about prayer. And the only person I knew that I would be able to trust with what just happened is my mom. The last letter that got out to her was the letter that I mailed out that night, right after the rape. But once the assault happened and everybody had started writing up and telling what happened from both nights, you can't deny there's 15 sheets of paper with everyone's recanting, everybody's version of the story. And everybody's story is consistent with this man raping me and no one stopping it. So now you know And I don't even have to tell you, nevertheless, with the addition to DOC, New Jersey DOC, not allowing my mail to go out and me getting any phone calls, no visits, no nothing. What they did was punish me with a year and 95 days of solitary confinement. What they said is that my actions could have gotten one of their officers hurt. And I don't understand what you mean by my actions. My actions were because I won't tell who my attackers were. It allows gang members to act with such brutality. And for the life of me, how can a court line officer, which was a cisgender woman, how could you read what just happened to me and punish me? How the heck do you make me a victim again, unjustly? It makes no sense. And then as time goes on, like I said, I have nowhere to vent to. So as far as my knowledge went, I'm going to be here for a little more than 5 years. So statute of limitations wasn't here. In my mind, clearly, I had a lot of things I didn't know. I get to East Jersey, and there's an officer there who was very disrespectful. He would go out of his way to tell me, excuse my language, but I'll smack the shit out you. You want to be a woman so bad, I'm going to treat you like a woman. He would like throw me into the wall and pin me against it and make sure that I could feel that he was aroused against me, and always kept wanting to strip search me. And I didn't understand, because you go home. You only here 5 days a week, and you go home after your 8 to 12-hour shift. What is so fascinating that you want to violate me? The only thing that DOC and its workers and other trash that was inside there, all everybody's showing me was, in those 6 years, was that the one thing that I thought I always had control of and that I owned, I no longer earned, and I no longer own, and that was my body. To watch these men violate the hell out of me, and watch these women who I would normally look at as a sister, cover and protect my family. When they finally were able to visit me at this point in time, I just want to do my time and go home. I don't want nobody bothering me no more. My mother just kept saying, what is wrong? I know you. You're my child. Her exact word says, you came out of my ass, so you can't tell me nothing ain't wrong with you. I'm looking at you. You can smile all you want. I can see that you're dead in the eyes. What is wrong? My family just found out in 2020 what I had to endure. And it's a suck situation, but it did all lead me to the work that I do now, because I know that a lot of people who get these opportunities, they're here and their focus is on saying that there's changes to the DOCs across the country, or the BOJs, that there's changes or stuff like that. That's necessarily doesn't happen. That seems more like it's an Oz or a movie version of things. And I'm here to tell you, it does happen. I still have scarring on me, not just mentally, but physically. It does happen. And DOCs across this country are covering it the hell up. And now that I do know about the Priya situation, I try to tell, I don't like to say my clients, but my members, you have to choose this battle. I'm going to side with whatever you want to do, but
Got your back.
because I can't protect you. It's a little different on the street, filing a rape claim or assault claim. But when you're inside there, you're against this big machine that's going to protect itself and the bullies to the fullest of their degree. Because they don't want lawsuits, and they're going to protect themselves. And those who get the opportunity to get heard it's still like, if I would have known about Priya at that time, I asked myself, would I have said something knowing that it happened to me? The first time it happens is right in the beginning of my incarceral bed. I would have been scared shitless. Y'all already shown me what y'all gonna do to me. What else are you gonna do to me? I've been home 10 years, April 1st, 2024. I still have nightmares at times in my own home. So it's like, sucks.
Now, thank you, Jen, for sharing and your transparency. And what is common with both you and Jan is that you mentioned how you just pretty much just suffered in silence, right? I'm just going to allow these things to take place while I'm here. And I have family that loves me, but I'm not even going to share what has been happening, what I have endured, as you said, Jen, with them, right?
Yep.
And so do you think, that is the common consensus? Because once again, Priya is there, right? Priya is there. It wasn't there when you were there, Jan. You didn't know about it until that other person wanted to file, so there's that lack, which is totally a non-compliant situation. There is no reason whatsoever that you should be housed in a correctional facility and not have knowledge of or access to file a PREA report, right? Or have the knowledge of what that is and what it looks like, right? And be able to reach out to your family members and say, hey, this has happened to me. And maybe you don't file that report, but you can have your family member or a third party outside of the prison file the report, right? These are things that just, right? So you suffering in silence. Do you think that that is why individuals are not filing these reports as regularly as they could? And either of you can, mention that.
I know one thing, when the DOJ does their survey and they came out with the figure several years ago that over 216,600 people were sexually assaulted in prisons and jails every year. I've never agreed with that number. I know for a fact, if they'd asked me, I said, nope, nothing's going on. I don't know about Jennifer, but that was what I would have said. And I can't help but think there's a lot more people like Jennifer and I that wouldn't say anything. I think that number's a whole lot higher. And PREA compliant or not, why do we have to have a special law telling people you can't rape somebody in prison? Why does there have to be a special law for that? Rape is against the law. Plain and simple. So why do we have to have a special one for people who are incarcerated? Yes, we were incarcerated. We were inmates. We were whatever you want to call us. But we were still people. We are still people. And when I finally told my husband what happened, after they came to me, his first question was, why didn't you tell me? And I said, but I did. I wrote him hundreds of letters and burned every one of them. Because like Jennifer, I knew I couldn't write it in a letter and send it to him because they read your letters. That letter never would have made it to him. He came to visit me every other week. I could have told him then, but I couldn't. I didn't. I was protecting myself. And would I do the same thing now, knowing what I know about Priya? I think I would. Because unfortunately, PREA is only as good as the people who are implementing it. And there are too many facilities where it's not being implemented properly.
I want to touch upon, and you both said it. I know that you mentioned counseling, that you've been through counseling, maybe still going through counseling. Jennifer mentioned still having nightmares 10 years after incarceration, having this trauma that you're still dealing with and addressing. Talk about your therapy, your experience, Jennifer.
I didn't know that I needed it.
Mm.
And sadly, it's not really accessible in a lot of locations. Even when you are incarcerated, I did have a therapist inside there. She made me very comfortable to share a lot of things, but that's one topic I didn't want to share. Even when I first came home and finally got a therapist here, it only happened because I was self-harming myself. My mind became my own worst enemy. When you're in a place that's supposed to be a safe place, and you happen to turn the TV on, and one scene on one show or one movie makes you flash back to one of the worst times in your life. It is not something you could just shake off. I just can't turn the channel or pause it and act as if it's okay, because it's not. It messes with your mental. And the therapy only got to happen because they threatened to civically commit me. Because I wouldn't stop self-harming myself. But I just wanted to exit. Because as long as I exited, I wasn't thinking about the harm that I would do to my family, me leaving. I just know that I didn't want her. It's too much to bear. It's too much. And it's not okay. It's not okay for other people to put that much fear in me. Before prison, I've worked hard to become the person that I am. And I thought that I was pretty resilient. I know I've been a protector to so many others. And at that time, I was helpless.
Yeah.
What do you do? I'm outpowered. I'm outnumbered. It's not like I had it wasn't like I had even other girls around me to share with at the time of it. Take out the equation of me reaching out to a PREA. I didn't even have other girls at the facilities to talk to. There were a handful of out gay men, but they started to have a disdain for me because they're thinking that all these guys who they like, they want their attention. And you're not getting it. And in reality, but you think, in reality, you're thinking that, oh, these guys, I'm just doing whatever with them. Everybody had a job to do, clearly, and they all were serving the same purpose, to get out of me what they could get out of me, and it's nothing I could do, and everybody's going to protect each other, even when it comes down to the strip searches. Do you know how random it is? You're not even running down on my room to tear my room up because you're looking for nothing. You're pulling me out my cell or putting me onto the unit, and you're strip searching me. And I'm turning around and I'm watching grown men jerking off, masturbating to me. It's just a suck thing that in everyday life, there's to a point where even being home, to have certain males, I do not want cisgendered heterosexual men to hug me, because sometimes when they hug you, everybody wants to press their whole body against you. I don't want to feel your print against my body. It's uncomfortable. Everything makes it taxing. And I do know that there's a lot of people who are suffering from rape, prison-wise and free, so-called free world-wise, who possibly may never get the mental help that they need to help them even cope or even to begin some kind of a healing process. And even if you do, it still doesn't mean that it's going to even be effective. It's easy to cause harm and trauma. It's hard to heal from it.
So, LaVar, I want to bring you into the conversation. Now, you have listened to Jennifer and Jan, and you, once again, not only a mental health professional, but you also have worked within the correctional system. What are your thoughts, and how can you, what can you share and say to support what these ladies have shared today?
Yeah, I mean, their stories are really impactful and heartfelt. Um, I think it's important to emphasize that there's a critical intersection between, mental health and sexual trauma, especially within the context of PREA and in the prison system. Individuals who experience, sexual trauma often face significant other mental health challenges. That includes, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and even substance use disorders. In a correctional center, you can be very vulnerable to sexual assault. It's very heightened, and I think people on the outside really don't understand how much it does occur. Jan spoke about the numbers and how, she believed that the numbers are more, and I absolutely agree with her. It's probably 2 to 3 times more than what's actually being reported and documented. And that's one of the challenges, is that, prison rape and sexual assault is so underreported that we really don't know what the true number it is. But I believe, just like Jan, that it is more than what we're being told. And so I think PREA has brought some awareness around the issue. It hasn't completely, resolved the issue, because we know this is something that continues to happen in the prison system. The goal of it is to, one, hold the perpetrators accountable, and then two, try to find and bring justice to the actual survivors of rape and sexual assault in prison. I come from more of a clinical background. In my experience working in the correctional, I dealt with substance use disorders and co-occurring disorders. I can recall there were times when I would hold, groups with a lot of the men, and I talked about, how did they end up in prison to start with? And a lot of them just, about my charges, or, talked about, and it always stemmed back to some sort of trauma that they experienced in their own life, even through childhood. And a lot of them didn't even make that connection. And I can almost guarantee that most people that get incarcerated have experienced some sort of significant trauma throughout their life, even beginning in their childhood. So trauma-informed care practices within the correctional setting is so important to start dealing with and talking about that trauma. It's not easy. There's some wounds that you don't want to open, that just aren't, all wounds aren't visible. And so it's not an easy discussion. The correctional setting is not the most conducive setting to open up, traumatic wounds and to deal with some of those things. But I do think, PREA is something that we have to continue to push and advocate for. I'm glad that, people like Jen and Jennifer are out there advocating and speaking before Congress and doing all these things and bringing more awareness to it. And so I know from my experience, when I walk on the pod, I would see PREA posted. I think the number was #55.
Yes.
But what would upset me would be is when some of the inmates would use it as a weapon to maybe get some of the staff removed from the pod. Yeah. And that's kind of where PREA is taken lightly, is not taken as seriously, because sometimes they find a way to use it for other means. But, you know, I think some of the stigma associated with, you know, rape and sexual assault is one of the reasons why it's so underreported. I think the lack of trust in authority figures is another reason. And then the retaliation, you know, that you have to deal with, and all of that kind of stuff, and having to deal with that. And so it does a lot to your mental health. And just being incarcerated in general, your mental health is deteriorating. And so I think it's really, really important, not even for the mental health aspect, right, but as they transition back into the community, that they are seeking mental health support services to be able to manage mental health symptoms and also cope with some of the situations they experience.
Now, LaVar, as a person who worked in the prison system, as an employee, a staff member, and I touched upon it earlier when we're talking about alleged consensual sexual relationships with the incarcerated person and a CO. Have you seen that in your experience, or what are your thoughts on that? Like what we talk about the trauma that brings someone into incarceration, but what is the driving factor that would make someone who is a correctional officer, and primarily it's often female correctional officers that engage in these relationships with someone that's incarcerated. So what drives that?
I think, you know, some of the staff lack of self-esteem. They've been through some trauma themselves. In some instances, I've seen they use it as a way of power and control, you know, abusing that power and control over the inmate, even through the use of their own body, you know. And so, yeah, I have seen it, haven't seen it actually happening, but I have heard of it happening between staff, and it's not consensual. In my opinion, it's not consensual at that point. I think it's an abuse of power and control in that moment. And that's what I think it mainly stems from.
And Jen touched upon it in that transition and Jan as well, coming home from prison, experiencing this sexual violence, this victimization, and the relationships, right, that you have. Jan has been married. I believe it's been 40 years since you've been married, right? So that's a beautiful thing. Been married for 40 years. Jennifer has a great family and support system. With how did you come home and relate with your family, with your spouse, with, and Jennifer can chime in as well. But Jan, how did that look coming home and having to wear this face, that, I'm home now, and like, so I'm getting a job, I'm going to do, what's going on in here? And how you relate.
For me, it was because I buried it, almost like it never happened in the beginning. And I didn't think about it, nothing. So it was kind of, I can't say our life went back to normal because, what's normal? But, we were married, I was working, he was working, we were raising kids. And then when internal affairs came to me, and it was like, holy shit, I was actually reporting to my parole officer, and his phone rang, and he answered it, and he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, she's sitting right across from me. And my heart went, and he talked for a minute, and then he put the call on hold, and he said, that's internal affairs. They want to talk to you, but they want to talk to me first. He said, you want to go back out in the lobby? And the old fight or flight. I literally was on the verge of running. I didn't know what was going on, didn't have a clue. But I stayed. And when he came and got me, I sat back down and he said, "Now, when you were in prison, you worked at the prisoner store, right?" I said, "No, I worked at the Men's Warehouse across the parking lot from the prisoner store." And he kind of hemmed it on. He said, "Well, did you ever have any trouble with anybody?" And it was like a ton of bricks hit me in the face. I knew what he was talking about. I burst into tears. And I remember him slowly kind of pushing the box of Kleenex across the desk at me. And it all came out.
Now, was your
And
husband aware at this time of
no,
what? Mhm.
nope. That was when I said to him, "Well, I guess I have to go home and tell my husband." And so, being the cowardly person that I was, I called him and had him meet me at McDonald's and told him there, because I thought, well, at least there he won't make a scene, you know. And we did finally come home and finish talking about it, but I'll never forget him saying that, you know, why didn't you tell me? That was when things changed for us, because it was like, boom, I have to deal with this now.
Mhm.
And he was the first one to tell me, you need to get into some counseling. I started with our local Y, because they're well known for their sexual assault counseling.
Mhm.
Everything was going great until they found out that I was in prison when I was raped. Okay, didn't know that made a difference, but I guess it did. And so I stopped going. I finally found another counselor. Same thing. Couldn't treat me because didn't know how to treat a prisoner. I said, well, I'm not a prisoner anymore. I'm free, but that's okay. I finally found a great counselor. It took a long time, a lot of talking, a lot of crying. I also had to deal with the guilt I felt for the other women. In our instance, we were one of the lucky ones because he was convicted. That's a whole nother story in itself. It involves absconding in Alaska, and but he went to prison.
Mhm.
And we went to the sentencing, and I told the judge, I want him to go to prison. I want him to know what it's like to lose total control of your life, to have somebody tell you what to do, when to do it, where to do it, and how to do it. But I said, not even he deserves to be raped in prison, because nobody does. Like I said, rape is not part of the sentence. I know the judge didn't say that. And, I've been out for over 20 years and I still see a counselor, a trauma specialist. And I'm still healing, and in fact, one thing my husband says is every time I tell this story, I heal a little more. And it's true, I do, you know. But I'm still healing, I have PTSD, among, other issues. And, to this day, I take medicine so I can sleep without waking up screaming and kicking and crying. And probably always will. But at least I can sleep, and, I know, like when Jennifer was talking, and those memories don't go away. They just don't, you know. But I've also met a lot of survivors that it took over their whole life, and it changed them totally. It changes you, there's no doubt. But I decided I wasn't going to let it take over me. I wasn't going to let him win again. And that's when I got involved in becoming an advocate. And, you know, I got involved with an organization called Just Detention International. And JDI is the only organization in the world whose sole purpose is to put an end to prisoner rape. They gave me a voice. And I've learned by telling my story, I can hopefully help other people.
Now, Jen, I want to go back to you, and you're in therapy as well, just as Jan has been going through therapy, and based on what she's saying, she'll probably be doing it lifelong. And is that similar to you? Your experience with therapy, but also you mentioned about your family not knowing and then coming home and there was a difference there. How did that transition from prison with that experience impact your relationship with your family members, your loved ones, and how is therapy helping in this process?
I don't think we began our as a collective family healing process until maybe these like last 5 years. The beginning process for me was even though I wasn't ready to share it with them, it was me realizing that me acting as if it didn't exist wasn't getting me nowhere.
Right.
Because clearly it exists. It's affecting my daily life. There have been romantic situations as well as family situations, especially when it comes to the men who I'm different around. There's been men who've been in my life, like family and family, forever. Drinking and drugging. I don't want you around me. Definitely not one-on-one, because the fear is real that your drunk mind let your appendages react and you try to violate me too. I don't know. But at least now everyone is aware so they can pinpoint the difference in me. I don't care to sit down with them and have a one-on-one about the topic. But it's moments that I do share if asked at the right time. But at least we have some clarity and understanding, and also in the topic of them pushing me to date again is just not the same. I ended up in prison protecting and not speaking up with a relationship and of a man. Men inside there have violated me. Those men and their bad actions are still haunting me. Do I really want to gamble with another man who can possibly be just as tormentive as them and add on to the trauma that previous men have already done? These are the things that's in my head. And I have at a point in time thought that I was fine and decided to not do what I should have been doing mental health wise, because I thought that I was in a better place, but clearly I wasn't. And so I'm back and I'm here. And I will say what Jen just said, that I do know me doing work that I do It is empowering to self, to take back some of the power that was taken from me. And it also helps my family to know that I'm not a prisoner in my own head or a prisoner of their actions. I'm getting past it. I'm getting it in order, and just know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to keep myself mentally and emotionally on track.
Good for you.
Absolutely. I want to kind of, as we start to kind of wrap up and allow for questions, if anyone has any questions, I want to kind of wrap it up with LaVar. When how can family members, loved ones, the community, how can we help support those who have been incarcerated, who have been victims of sexual violence? What, and there's that a hard, fast, answer, right? But what would you suggest if we were going to create a plan? How can we support them? What can we do even more to help them that have experienced this, as advocates, as loved ones, as organizations who are focused on implementing PREA effectively? And that's the key. We have one situation where PREA didn't exist, and then we have another situation where PREA wasn't available or known because it wasn't in compliance. And then we have, like you said, you are aware. So what can we do for their mental health overall? Just kind of
Yeah, the main thing is just being there for them. A lot of times family members or just, advocates of the victims, they try to rush to a resolution where this takes time. And so get involved. There are a lot of support groups out there. There are a lot of organizations, depending on your area. Get involved, educate yourself, do some research, go speak in front of your local government agencies and get involved in talking to the people who make policies and, get involved in your community. I mean, there are so many families out there that have incarcerated loved ones right now that don't even know that they're going through it right now. And so, when you get those phone calls, you may hear a change in their voice. Ask them, what's really going on. Maybe have a secret code word or just, inquire a little bit more into what's going on into your loved one's daily life while incarcerated, because it is not easy and it's not hard. And sometimes they can't even talk about it. And so when they come home, they're still in that, space where, do I say something? Do I share? How's it going to impact my intimate relationships with my spouse or my girlfriend or my romantic partner? All of those things. Get involved in therapy, family therapy, couples therapy, be a part of that process and just be supportive. It's not an easy road. It's not a quick fix. And just being understanding, that they've gone through an experience that, many of us who haven't can't even imagine what that's like. And a lot of them have to live with that for the rest of their life and be able to cope with it. So, there's therapies out there. Find a therapist that specializes in trauma, and, sexual assault victims and things like that, and be a part of those organizations and start your organization yourself. I think it's great. And then come together and work with other organizations that have the same mission for your family. That can be very, very rewarding.
Absolutely. Now, and just one last point. Now, you worked in the Virginia correctional facilities, and just one. When we talk about implementation, do you feel that it was implemented well and you don't have to name the facility that you were in or anything, but do you feel that it was implemented effectively when you were there?
I think it could definitely have some improvements. I think, there's so many other obstacles and challenges in that. I mean, staffing is a huge issue in the correctional facilities. I mean, there are just not enough correctional officers in a lot of these facilities. So that's one. But I do think, I know as far as, with my team, my clinical team, we talked a lot about PREA and fraternization in almost every staff meeting that we held. I mean, that was something that we preached on a weekly basis to our staff and things like that. So just having that dialogue, continue to have those conversations, working with the Department of Corrections, doing trainings with the staff and things like that, and know what some of the signs are. Because you can almost look in someone's eyes when you go in the pod and see that they're going through something that they really can't talk about. And so just paying attention to those little subtle signs that may indicate, that something is just not right, not happening. And then, they're not going to always pick up that phone and dial pound 55 or whatever it is at your facility. And so, having those individual counseling sessions, things like that, give us an opportunity to really be able to help advocate and support the individuals. So.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to open up the room for any questions that may be present for anyone that's here. If you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or you can jump on the mic. And if you have a question for either Jennifer Love Williams, Jan Lastocy, or LaVar Reynolds, you can just come on and ask your question. Unmute your mic. Anyone? And once again, you can put it in the chat also if you have a question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Adrena. How are you?
Doing well, Adrena. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Do you have a question for anyone specific?
I have more so of a response because I wasn't actually raped in prison, but I was raped by my stepfather, and I had a difficult time dealing with that. But I just wanted to let the women know that counseling was a great help to me, and a whole lot of prayer, and actually to forgive the person that did what they did to me. But it wasn't easy. It was a lot of counseling, like a lot of prayer, and I never got a chance to face the person that did it, confront, should I say, because he knew what he did and he was living with living in our household. But when someone robs you of that, it takes a part of you. And I think I heard one of the women say, as far as having a relationship and trying to move forward with a relationship, it makes it very difficult for that. But a lot of prayer and counseling has helped me to be able to begin to put my life back together. So I just want to encourage both of those women to let them know that just to keep praying and trust God, and you're going to get through it. And I'll be praying for you. Thank you. My name is Adrena Coleman.
Thank you so much, Adrena. Thank you so much. Anyone else? You can unmute your mic if you have a question. Okay, we have a question in the chat. I'm a grad student with a research interest around the limitations of PREA as it relates to incarcerated Black men. Are there organizations, researchers that I should reach out to? That's a great question. And I believe that we have present some very prominent people that are familiar with prayer and work within that space. Is there anyone that would you like to share some contact information, a link or anything in the chat for this grad student? That would be great. Or get on the mic and share what you do with your organization.
I can speak. This is Michaela Bowman. I'm with the Free Resource Center. I was a former co-director of the Resource Center, and I now work as an advisor to it. We don't get the opportunity to do a lot of research and are actually always looking for research. We provide training and technical assistance, and so we get a lot of information about what's going on in the field. And certainly I think we have a lot of insight into the limitations of the law and the standards and the ways, what we hope that the law and the standards achieve and where we see that they are not living up to the promise of the law. So I think there would be certainly people at the Resource Center who would be willing to talk to you, with the understanding we don't have a lot of concrete data beyond the anecdotes. But I think the ways in which the law and the standards aren't serving specific populations is something that we're always particularly concerned about. And so, you know, that particular, what you raise, the limitations of its ability to protect incarcerated Black men, I think would be something that there are a number of people on our staff, including me, would be really interested in talking to you about, without us being able to offer a lot of concrete research, but I think could provide, you know, some feedback about what we see in our work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michaela, for being here. You want to share your
Yes,
link?
I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much for being here. Wonderful question and some very good research that that you're doing, Mr. Smith. Any other questions? Any other questions? And then we also have something in the chat to represent the state of Virginia, who is the PREA ADA advisor. There's a phone number there. So you have some information in the chat. This is available to anyone who's interested in learning more. And upon, you know, once we finish here, and I'll send out a resource list as well with some information if you decide that you want to kind of explore it further. So, any last comments, questions, concerns?
I would just like to thank Jen and Jan and LaVar for everything that you've shared. You know, these are really incredibly difficult conversations to have, and it's takes a lot of courage and stamina to put yourselves out there. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and the importance of sharing your stories, and LaVar, the work that you're doing as well. And just thank you for hosting this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a comment from the chat from Sarah Watts, who's having some technical difficulties, but she wants to thank both Jan and Jen for their openness. She's sure that it wasn't easy to share, and she's praying with you guys and everything. And thank you to LaVar as well, and myself. It was very informative. We appreciate that feedback. Oh, and that's your daughter, Jessica?
Yes.
Oh, hi. That's wonderful. Well, in the sake of time, once again, want to start on time, want to end on time. And I want to once again thank everyone for being here and sharing this space with us, and hearing the stories of these wonderful people. They're not only their lived experience but their professional expertise, their hearts, and their transparency. I myself am always honored and humbled when I'm able to bring us together, you know, those who have been behind the wall and those who are working within that space, to just really be able to show that love beyond the wall, in which I stand for and represent. So thank you once again, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.